All right, welcome in to the New England Nation Overtime Podcast. Good to do another episode. It's definitely a good thing because that means the Patriots are still playing. Patriots taking on the Texans this Sunday at 3 o'clock in the divisional round. And with me to talk about the matchup is New England Nation analyst Andy Gresh. Gresh, good to be doing this.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm good. I'm
Yeah,
good.
well, Sam's got another comp day or whatever, so that's the real problem. Yeah. We had to get someone else because Sam's got to, he's got to teach a kid a curveball on a baseball diamond somewhere.
Last time we spoke Monday, obviously during the Patriots wrap, we didn't know if it was going to be the Steelers or the Texans. Now we know it's going to be the Texans. Just your overall thoughts on the matchup and kind of how the Patriots can exploit it.
I like it. I am not afraid. I know people are, soiling themselves over the Houston defense and stuff like that. And it's a good defense, don't get me wrong. But I do think there are ways to attack it that actually fit what New England does very well. That 6-0 line look, number one, in terms of running the ball. But also when New England puts 6-0 linemen on the field, so you got your seventh guy is Drake May, then it's how are you going to mix and match from there? Right. Do you put both running backs in the game and split out both tight ends out wide? Do you put one running back in the game and one tight end in the slot and two wide receivers? So in a lot of ways, it'll be interesting to see how Houston, who loves to play a lot of nickel, how Houston will kind of set up to deal with New England, because I think really it's tight ends and running backs in this game, in the passing game. Now, there have been times where Houston has, given it up to like Tyler Warren. They gave it up big to Trey McBride in a game where he had 12 catches and 2 touchdowns and over 125 yards in Arizona. But I think the teams that have gotten to this Houston defense, or where they're at least vulnerable, is get the ball to the tight ends, get the ball to the running backs in the passing game. I watched that Houston-Las Vegas game. Genty, 1 catch, 60 yards, touchdown. You can catch this defense. You really can. But I think it's going to be more Travion Henderson and Hunter Henry than it's necessarily going to be, say, Pop Douglas and Steph Diggs. I'm sure Diggs will get his, but I think the real way to eat consistently against this defense and compromise them is to get the ball to the tight ends and the running backs.
And to your point about Diggs, you're kind of seeing it over the last 5 or 6 games that more and more teams are kind of doubling him, especially on third down, just to kind of take away that threat, because they know Drake May wants to go to him, and rightfully so on third down. But and going to the running backs, that definitely helps. You've been able to get that running game going. We saw Ramondre Stevenson have that 48-yard catch and run.
He can catch it too. That's the other thing, is that he can catch it, and I think people sort of forget about that a couple years ago, the disaster that was Matt Patricia, the one thing that came out of it was that we found out Ramondre could catch the ball a little bit. So while he's not the main weapon, if he's the guy who can get that one catch for 35 yards in the right moment, that's how you really break the heart of this Houston defense.
Now, we're recording this on a Thursday. It seems that Christian Gonzalez no longer has the red non-contact jersey. You spoke to me earlier this week saying that doesn't matter.
He'll be in.
But
yeah.
he'll play.
Yeah.
Just how much does that change things for the Patriots defense?
Well, I think it allows them to then match up against Nico Collins. And as we speak, there's questions about both Gonzalez and Collins. And so it's interesting. If both of those guys are off the field, wash. If they're both on the field, probably a wash in a lot of ways. So if they just kind of take themselves out of it and Collins isn't making huge plays, I read a breakdown of offensive coordinators the other day, and Nico Collins. So, for example, in Kansas City, plays called for Rashee Rice, 2.2% of the year. There were plays that were called specifically for Rashee. Nico Collins, it's 0.2% that he had just plays that were like, all right, we're going to get him the ball and we're going to let him cook. That is I mean, that is crazy that there's that big a difference. Now, that's also Nick Caley, who almost ended up here on the Gerard Mayo. Thank the lucky stars that didn't happen. But this is one where I think Vrabel and the defensive staff, right? Because we know Terrell Williams has been probably contributing from afar. Kerr's done a nice job of calling this defense. But at the end of the day, I think there's a good defensive minds here. And let's remember, Vrabel's got some pretty good institutional knowledge of Houston, having faced them in twice a year in consecutive years. So I think that's another reason why the matchup really fits, because we forget with Vrabel being away that year in Cleveland, for 6 years before that, he was seeing the Texans twice a year.
Even with a different coaching staff, obviously D'Amico Ryans wasn't there. Do you still feel like that has?
Yeah, definitely, because I think Vrabel will have context of the changeover and sort of where they were and kind of where they've gotten to and who they have become. I think a year away is not that big a deal. Vrabel is still plugged in and connected. But look, Houston, this is typical, to me, this is a typical Houston team, right? You have questions on the quarterback. They can run it a little bit. We know they can rush the passer. Well, guess what? If you're in 3rd and 3, then the defense rushing the passer don't mean nothing.
Right.
So it's something that you can control. There are teams who have had success with tight ends and backs, and I think that's where McDaniels attacks early, and then it's to the wide receivers. And the other thing, and I know that everybody worries about it with C.J. Stroud, the other thing that Houston has to deal with is if Drake May wants to tuck it and run, that's 50 yards right there on a couple different plays. So when you think about, maybe the one throw to Ramondre that can go for 35, or the one run on 3rd and 12 that the kid makes to be able to get the first down, does New England have a couple of 3rd down just rip your guts out type plays against this Houston defense? And then they're in the cold, and then they're on roller skates, and then offensively you're cooking a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing to kind of think of, it seems as we're getting closer to Sunday that snow is going to be in the forecast. Texans, obviously being a dome team, playing in the South. It'll be interesting to see. Wind.
That's the big thing for those teams that have to go outdoors, because, you can layer for the cold. I know no one told the Dolphins this, but you can layer for the cold to be able to deal with that. Then it comes down to how windy is it going to be. And you know what? I rolled this out on Rhode Island Sports Weekly, and I might as well bust it out now. If you go back to 2023 outdoors in the playoffs, and then this year, Kaimi Fairburn, the kicker of Houston's, had a fantastic season, 2nd most field goals in the NFL. But you got to dig in on those numbers. Against the Jets, he was 2-4, out 2 for 4 on field goals outdoors. He missed one in Pittsburgh, missed one in Kansas City outdoors in the playoffs last year, missed one in Baltimore outdoors in the playoffs in 2023. So while this kid's really good, the later in the year that it gets and the more you're outdoors, the chances go up based on his performance that there could be a missed kick in there. And if this game is going to be as close as some people think, that's a lot of pressure for Fairbairn. I mean, it's not like he's going to forget that he missed outside. Right. And really watching pregame, and I know we're all going to be there, right, but watching pregame, kind of how it goes in terms of which end does Fairbairn feel. He was in New England here last year and missed a kick. Yeah. So, outdoors, I think Fairbairn, there's a higher chance of a miss. He's been perfect outside before, but cold weather, a little wind, let's amp up the pressure a little bit. He's already missed one in this stadium. Here we go. Let's crank it up, fans.
Yeah, definitely something to watch over in that game particular. But coming up on the New England Nation Overtime podcast, we'll look at the other side of the ball, and particularly a rough little comeback for Will Campbell. We'll dive into that coming up. All right, welcome back to the New England Nation Overtime podcast. New England Nation analyst Andy Gresh here with me to talk about the Patriots matchup against the Texans this upcoming week. We talked about kind of our initial thoughts kind of going into the break. We've been talking all week about this Texans defense. We'll talk about them in just a second, but I do want to talk about Will Campbell. Obviously, his first game back from his knee injury. What did you like from his performance against the Chargers, and kind of, what is there to learn from it? Because it'll definitely be another challenge going up against that Texans.
Well, he hung in there, and this is where, really not getting quality reps or a couple of games in, or even one full game in before the playoffs started, it was predictable. A, the playoff intensity gets cranked up, and B, the guy's a rookie, and he's coming back from injury, so he's got to go out there and find himself. Look, there were some lumps there, no question, but I thought Jared Wilson was the real problem. Like, a lot of people are talking about Campbell as if he went out there and, Matt lighted it in Miami and gave up 4 sacks to Jason Taylor. To me, the bigger issue was Jared Wilson, the left guard. There were times where the guy just got run over. And I don't know if anybody knew this or not, or it's probably out there by now. But before this season, no team had started rookies at both left tackle and left guard in the playoffs since, anyone? The 2005 Patriots.
Oh, wow.
With Nick Kazur and Logan Mankins. Boy, I got some Kazur stories right?
That one didn't end well.
No, it didn't. No, not for Nick Kazur, but for Logan Mankins, it was pretty good. Now I feel like we kind of got that flipped. So I think for Campbell, it's he's got to learn to trust himself again coming off of that leg injury. And you can only do so much in practice before you ultimately get out there. And again, it's not regular season speed. It's wild card playoff speed. And there's going to be divisional round playoff speed that's coming up. So I think he'll be okay. I would say that if Wilson has a real bad first quarter, maybe you turn to Ben Brown so it doesn't get extra leaky. I will say this. I think we're going to get a lot of the end tackle stunts and a lot of loops and things like that. I think Houston will do a lot to make sure those Patriots O-linemen got to be out there keeping their heads up and moving their feet, because there are times the head goes down and the feet stop, and that's when a guy like, Wilson gets toppled over.
Right. Is there anything that the Patriots can do to kind of scheme in practice, extra protection on the left side? I know that's something that we talked about over Darren Lowe.
Look, here's the thing. There's tons of ways they can run extra protection. Put the tight end over there and give him the flipper, along the way. You can, put old Mumford & Sons in motion and have them double teamed right there, depending on how you're feeling or where the ball is spotted. You can run 37 there, the fullback, to kind of help out somewhat. So, I think there are a lot of different ways to be able to do it. Can you do it without it being a tell? I just go back to this. Don't be like the Stillers. Don't be in 3rd and 10 all night.
Right.
And then you don't have to worry about it that much. Because I'll tell you this. Like, Will Anderson, good pass rusher, right? Nice player. Does he want to deal with 40 runs? Does he want to defend the run 40 times to have maybe a couple of times to rush the passer? That's, to me, where the rub is in this Houston defense. They got DNs who want to come ripping and snorting. Fine, go ahead. We'll hit you with the draw up underneath and do it the way McDaniels did with Danny Woodhead 15 years ago,
Right. Looking at the Texans defense, kind of from the other end with what the Patriots offense presents, kind of how do you approach kind of that offense?
Well, here's the thing. Houston plays their top 5 in terms of playing nickel defense this year. So the question becomes, I think, for them, how do they limit exposure of running backs lining up somewhere that they don't have an answer for, or running back motion to where the defense is going to tell you what they're running, and maybe you got a linebacker kicked out on Travion Henderson. I'll take that all day long. I think for Houston, they got to sort of pick their poison. Can we stop the run with 6 guys so that we can make sure our safeties can stay back far enough that a wide receiver doesn't wiggle free or that a tight end doesn't gash us down the seam? I think for Houston, the toughest thing for them to figure out is going to be, how are they going to defend when New England puts 5 skill guys on the field and they only go with 5 in protection, right? What's the combination? Josh McDaniels was infamous for years of having a formation where it was a spread set, no running back, but Kevin Falk could be lined up out wide, Gronk would be in the slot. Your number one wide receiver would be in the other slot. It creates all these mismatches and matchup nightmares is really what it is. So if you're Houston, how do you balance stopping the run while not getting gashed by big plays in the pass game because you got mismatches out there?
Right.
And that's a tall task, no question. I think there's a chance Hunter Henry could have a real big game depending on how Houston decides to play this.
Kind of, we saw it with Gronk, with Brady, but just the value of having a guy like Hunter Henry, how much has that helped kind of Drake May elevate his game in year 2?
Huge, and it also goes to show what an offensive coordinator who knows what they're doing could do with a tight end. Hunter Henry didn't have a Kelsey-type year or a Gronk-type year, but you know what he did? He caught, 8 or 9 touchdown passes. He was huge in the red area. He was huge in the middle of the field in between the hashes, and it's the same thing here. Henry was really misused in a lot of ways last year. Maybe asked to block a little too much and things like that. Right. He's competitive on that end, but he's really a play-action release down the middle of the field tight end, and that's what I kind of expect to see. Drop it behind the linebackers, but in front of the safeties. And then let's see if Houston starts to, or if New England runs the ball early and those safeties start creeping, that's when you're going to get the wiggle of the tight end up the field. Yeah.
Got it. I mean, even like looking back at his career with Phillip Rivers, you just saw he's not a guy that blocks. Like, he wants to be in open space. He wants to make the moves and stuff like that. So it's nice to see that they're kind of utilizing him that way. But coming up on the New England Nation Overtime podcast, we'll talk more about this matchup, as well as Gresh giving a little bit of his keys to what it's going to take for the Patriots to make it back to the AFC Championship game. All right, welcome back to the New England Nation Overtime podcast. Aniekan Okon here with New England Nation analyst Andy Gresh, talking about the Patriots' upcoming matchup against the Texans, I should say. Titans being at this. Titans at this.
Well, you got Vrabel on the mind, so there we go. There you go.
Anyway, playing the Texans in this one. Gresh, every week you give us our keys. Kind of, I don't want to tease it because I'm going to save it for the actual New England Nation show. But kind of, what are some things that you're looking at on both sides of the ball ahead of this one?
Well, a couple of things. And we talked about the Texans defense, right? So I found the number. They use nickel coverage at the 3rd highest rate in the NFL this season. That includes the playoffs. They're at 74% of the time they're out there playing nickel. Drake May leads the NFL in completion percentage at 73% and yards per attempt at 9.1 versus a nickel defense this year. The Texans eat on the takeaways, and we know from last week that that's something that Drake May is got to clean up, and that includes everybody. Running backs holding on to it, kick returners holding on to it, punt returners holding on to it as well. That's one of those that's kind of across the board. So how will Houston set up their nickel defense really becomes the game inside the game early on. I think the other thing is if you're New England, it's mandatory that you're not even in special teams. You need to win special teams. And I brought up Fairbairn earlier in terms of the kicks outside. All he's going to do is miss one to throw the scoring off a little bit, and then it's in New England's favor. But conversely, Borregales has been pretty good. We haven't worried about him, but it's also the return game. Yep. Can you get some cheap yards on a Marcus Jones punt return or something like that to be able to set you up with a little bit of field position? And then the other thing is, I think, don't be afraid of these guys. Right. I'm sick of hearing everybody this week talking about like this is – the New England Patriots of, say, 2013 or 14 that are coming in here to play. It's Houston. Right. They have not won a divisional round game ever. Right. This is normally where they kind of hit the ceiling, and that's it. Right. They got a good coach. I think the Patriots have the edge in coaching with Vrabel. There's some knowledge there, but also a lot of experience there too. And Josh McDaniels being the maestro. But that's going to be a big part of this, keeping the kid calm, knowing when to turn him loose and letting him run a little bit. I'd love to see it more around the goal line because I think Houston's going to be one of those teams. If New England's running it early, they're going to sell out hard, There we go. Zone read around the corner. Let the kid tiptoe in for a touchdown. I think New England has a lot of advantages in this game. I love it that people are like, oh, Houston's coming in here. It's like, no, we done dealt with this before, and I know it was Tom Brady who was the guy that was dealing with it. But, again, I said it last week, and I really believe it. Drake May, just be you.
Right.
Don't fumble. Don't turn it over, right? If Drake May gives us 70% completion percentage and 225 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, they'll win this game.
Right.
This isn't the game where he needs to be Superman.
Right.
Right? That might be the next one if New England wins and it's Buffalo coming in. But in reality, just be you. He didn't have the jitters, but he definitely was shaky at times out there. A little steadier performance will cut down the interception. That'll calm those jitters down a little bit. And I do think running the kid will also help kind of calm him down as well. Yeah.
And to your point, it was his first playoff game.
A lot of 29 guys, it was their first playoff experience.
Right.
And, they didn't play great, and they still won, 16-3, whatever it was. So I know the other team was a mash unit, but for New England to really leave a lot of points out there, I thought, that could have been – it really should have been a 30-3 game when it was all said and done.
Yeah, if you go back to – what is it, the Hooper touchdown, that could have been – there's probably a couple other plays in there that, could have went.
Well, the turnover. That's, the field position on the turnover where you thought you had a chance, man. That was a real killer.
Right.
And luckily, L.A. last week, they're given the gift. They could kick the field goal, take the points. They decide to go for it.
Right.
That worked out in New England's favor from a momentum standpoint. So, that's the other thing, too. How are these coaches, and not so much New England, but how will these coaches mix in analytics and think, I got to go for 2 when you really don't have to go for 2.
Right.
That kind of deal. We've seen teams go for it on 4th and 4 and give up really bad field position. Field position matters in these games. I'm a big believer in that Bill Parcells theory that, field position first. Is 4 and 4 analytically going to tell you to go for it? Or do you kick it the other way and make that team go 80 yards on the road against your defense? Right. I think, we look at it and just say, well, can the offense convert it? Yeah, but what would the defense do if you make that other team go 80 yards, try to score a touchdown? We forget about that end of it because I don't think there's as many numbers on that people would like to sink their teeth into.
Right, and to your point, the Chargers, their first offensive drive, went down the field, decided to go for it on 4th down. And you kind of understand, you want to get the touchdown, but, in a game like that, those 3 points would have made a huge difference.
It absolutely would have. And I think the whole, because the analytics say you should go for it, you forget about field position, kicking game, how's your defense playing? It really always should have been analytics with a caveat, right? There are some draft nerds and people that I have screamed at before who are never draft a kicker. You idiot. If I'm a kicker away, and you know what? There have been teams who've been a kicker away and they turn around and draft the best guy in the 3rd round. That's a need for your football team. Right. And I know it'll be you can fill it with Nick Folk and he'll be 60% of whatever, Herman Kickmonster would have been or something like that. And it's guys, when you say never draft a kicker because of analytics, that's why people rail against analytics. And especially when it comes to the in-game managing, there's a lot of ambiguity around the situation. There's a lot of people who are going to interpret things very differently, including the head coach and the offensive coordinator. They might be hearing the same thing, but each of them could be thinking very different signals. So I think that kind of stuff, when you get into now I'm gonna start to call it the critical analytical moments, where it's, am I gonna go for it on 4th and 3? Or can my punter pin him inside the 20-yard line and I can gain some field position for the next drive? Right. I think that gets forgotten about, and it's really a shame because it's those people online who want to scream, never draft a kicker because of the analytics.
Right. the Patriots certainly wouldn't have won that Buffalo game earlier in the year if they had Chad Ryland or Nick Folk as their kicker.
There's no question. No doubt about it. I mean, and things happen for a reason, but I think that special teams focus is going to be big on Sunday afternoon. I think the wind's going to kick up too, and that's going to be a big part of the ball handling. That's why I love indoor teams. Hey, by 2031, supposedly everybody in the AFC West will be indoor. Thank you very much. Because the teams like Cleveland and Cincinnati that can't get it right, it's an advantage for, the Giants and the Pittsburghs and the New Englands of the world.
Right. Football's an outdoor game.
It is.
Gresh, always a pleasure. Appreciate you.
Always fun. Thanks for letting me in for Sam.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's going to do it for the New England Nation Overtime Podcast. Hopefully, we have another episode. We will. But hopefully, we're talking about another win next week. But for Aniekan Okon, Andy Gresh, see you guys next week.